Okay, so this video is a little bit more about how to time your starter when you are working during the week, not getting home until too late to start bread. So you're basically just baking on the weekends. And how do I feed and time my starter for baking on the weekends? So this is going to assume that we're baking Saturday morning, like mid-morning. So we're going to feed it so that we could get it to a peak and either refrigerate it or feed it at a ratio that will make the rise happen longer than 4 hours. So up to this point, we've been doing feedings of 1-1-1, 1 part starter, flour, and water, and then it reaches peak in about 4 hours, provided that it's in a 78 to 80 degree environment, in your case, your oven with the light on. So we're at Thursday and we want to bake on Saturday. So how do we get our starter that's in the refrigerator ready to bake on Saturday? So what we're going to do is take the starter from the refrigerator on Thursday night when you get home from work at 6 o'clock, and we're going to do the maintenance feed. So you can review the video for that maintenance feed. It's 10 grams starter, 10 grams flour, 10 grams water. It's just a small amount. So in the end, you'll have 30 grams of starter. And Thursday at 6, you're going to do that when you get home. And then you're going to leave it out. I would leave it, you could leave it on your counter, but I would probably just sit it in your oven. You don't have to put the light on. And then when you get home on Friday, it will be what we call a very hungry starter. So you're going to get home on Friday, 24 hours later, take it out of the oven, and you're going to see that it is runny and flat. It will look like runny pancake batter, and it will smell a little acidic because the organisms have eaten all the nutrients from the flour. It will peak Thursday night while you're in bed at 10 or 11 o'clock, and then it will start to fall. So that's the natural progression of the starter. So you're going to have a very hungry starter, and you will have 30 grams of it. So what you could do is you could wait a few hours until, like, say 8 o'clock, and you can do a high ratio feed, which is probably what I would do. So I would wait until, like, say you're going to start baking Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, or start your dough Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. So you want your starter to peak at around 8 o'clock, give or take. So what you can do is a high ratio feeding. So how do we do a high ratio feeding? Well, that's what I'm going to show you now. So basically, you're going to take a small amount of starter. In this case, we're going to use about 8 grams of starter. That's 4. It's a very small amount. Okay, that's 8 grams of starter. And then we're going to get rid of the rest. So again, we said this is a high ratio, which will take longer to peak. We want it to take about 12 hours to peak. You won't be putting this in your refrigerator. It'll just sit in your oven. And it will be ready for you to bake tomorrow morning. Plus, your starter is going to be happier. It likes this kind of a feeding because it's a slow feeding, and it also makes the starter healthier because you're diluting out any acids that may have started to build up in your starter because you've been refrigerating it, or because you haven't, in this case, we haven't fed it in over 12 hours. So we've got 8 grams of starter in here. This is going to be a 1 part starter, 10 parts flour, 10 parts water. That's why we use such a small amount. So I'm going to put this back in our container. Make sure you've got a big enough container because this is going to expand quite a bit. All right, there's our 8 grams of starter. I'm gonna zero that out, and we're gonna go with 80 grams of flour. Okay, we got 80 grams of flour, and now we're gonna do 80 grams of warm water. Remember, we're using warm water, not room temperature, not hot. Better to have your starter a little bit on the dry side than too wet. So don't overdo the water. You can always add a tiny bit less water. And then we're just gonna mix this up. So let's do the math here. How much starter is this going to give us? So we've added 80 grams water, 80 grams flour, so that's 160 on top of the 8 grams we already had. So it'll be a little over about 168 grams of starter. So that's going to be plenty of starter for us to do our bake. And then you'll have plenty left over to keep your starter going. We could have actually started with less. We could have started with, say, 7 grams and done it, smaller. But I like to err on the side of just making sure I have enough. So we're going to mix that up. It's okay if there's a couple lumps in there. You aren't like whipping it till it's completely smooth. Just mix it until it's incorporated. There's no flour on the bottom. I'm just going to smooth it out. And then this is our 1-10-10. Okay, 1 part starter, 10 parts flour, 10 parts water. Will rise and peak and be ready to bake in about 12 hours. So we discussed that we're going to do this Friday night around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever. And when you get up Saturday morning, check it, look for it to be at peak. Refer back to those videos if you forget what peak is. When it's at peak, you could throw it in the fridge if you change your mind and want to bake Sunday, that's fine. Or it's ready to go to bake for you on Saturday. So I hope that explains it. That's it.